Hi, this is your Emma. So, the story of the day is quite interesting, and it's called Where Peace Glows, a Sleep Village You'll Love. And I hope the journey tonight is going to be a beautiful one for your peace, your dreams, and your rest. So, whenever you're ready, just close your eyes, get cozy, and let the story carry you far, far away. There's a place not many know about. A village tucked inside a fold of hills so gentle that the earth itself seems to cradle it. It's not marked on any maps, and if you ask the people who live there for directions, they'll likely just smile, shrug their shoulders, and say, if you're meant to find it, you will. That's the way Starfall has always been, not lost, not hidden, just waiting. The first thing you notice about Starfall isn't the houses or the landscape. It's the stillness. It's a stillness that doesn't feel empty or lonely, but full. Full of the kind of quiet that lets you hear things you forgot to listen for your breath. The wind in the trees, the faint hum of time when it stops trying so hard to be something. There's a kind of softness there, as though the world itself has let out a sigh and finally decided to rest. The village is old, but not tired. The houses are built of smooth, pale stone, their roofs sloped with curved clay tiles that collect moss and flower petals. Ivy drapes the walls like lace, and every window has a sill, and every sill has a pot, and every pot overflows with something growing: lavender, marigolds, forget-me-nots. The cobblestone paths aren't straight, but they know exactly where they're going. They wind around corners with the patience of a story being told slowly, lovingly, one word at a time. In Starfall, people don't hurry. They rise when the light filters through their shutters and sleep when the crickets begin to sing. The days are filled with simple things: bread rising in warm kitchens, chickens clucking softly in sun-dappled yards, sweaters drying on lines strung between porch beams. Children walk barefoot in the summer and stamp patterns in the snow come winter. There is a bell in the square, and it chimes only once a day at dusk when the sky turns. The color of violets and the swallows make their final sweep through the air before settling in for the night. And that's when the lanterns begin to glow. They don't flick on all at once. That wouldn't be Starfall's way. Instead, they wake gently, one by one, as though the evening is carefully lighting them by hand. They hang from every eave and fence post, tucked into the crooks of tree branches, mounted on stone walls and iron hooks. Some are glass, others are metal, and some are no more than old jars with holes in the lid. But all of them glow the same soft golden light. A light that doesn't demand attention, a light that simply holds you. No one really remembers when the lanterns first began. They've always just been there. But everyone in Starfall knows who lights them. Every evening, just after the bell tolls once, a man begins to walk. His name is Elier. You'd know him if you saw him, though you might miss him at first, because he moves like the evening itself, quiet and unhurried. He wears a long coat patched in places with different fabrics: navy wool, faded green linen, soft brown corduroy. His boots are old, but well cared for, and his steps make the kind of sound that seems to match the rhythm of the village: soft, steady, and sure. Over one shoulder, Elier carries a satchel, worn smooth at the edges from years of use. Inside are small glass jars, each filled with a pale, pulsing glow like the heartbeat of a firefly. In his other hand, he carries a staff made of ash wood. Not for walking, though he does lean on it sometimes when he's thinking. It's mainly for lifting lanterns that hang just out of reach. Alier doesn't speak as he works. He doesn't need to. The village already knows his story, even if no one could tell it the same way twice. Some say he was born in the valley during the long sleep, the winter when the snow didn't melt for 3 months and time forgot to pass. Others whisper that he walked into town from the woods one evening just as the stars were rising and never left. A few believe he isn't entirely of this world, but no one says that too loudly. It's not polite to make mysteries feel unwelcome. What everyone agrees on, though, is this. Alier is the keeper of the lanterns. He doesn't ask for anything in return. He simply lights them. Every night, one by one. He begins, always, at the willow tree on the southern edge of the village. It grows at the bend of a path that loops toward the square, its long green tendrils brushing the ground like fingers. Beneath the tree is the first lantern, a round one with deep blue glass and an iron handle shaped like a curled leaf. Alier sets his staff against the tree, opens his satchel, and pulls out a jar. The light inside isn't bright. It glows like a distant memory, warm, familiar, but gentle. He unscrews the lid and tips it into the lantern. The light spills in, curls around the glass, and flickers once before settling into a steady glow. He stands for a moment, letting the light find its rhythm. Then he picks up his staff and continues on. Past the baker's house, where the windows are always fogged with the scent of flour and spice, Alier lights another lantern. This one is hung low on a rusted hook near the garden gate, where rosemary grows wild and chickens sometimes peck at the stones. The lantern here is shaped like a teardrop and has a crack in the base where the light always leaks just a little. Alier smiles when he sees it. He never fixes the crack. Some things are meant to shine through the broken parts. He walks along the stream that runs behind the weaver's cottage. The water is shallow and slow, with flat stones that children love to leap across in the summer. The lanterns along the stream are smaller, some no bigger than teacups, and may re-nestled between rocks and tree roots. Alier crouches down to light them, careful not to disturb the moss that grows around their bases. Each one flickers to life with a whisper of warmth, like an exhale. By the time he reaches the square, half the village is glowing. The bell has long since quieted, and the sky above is turning a deep, dusky blue. A few windows are still lit with the last movements of evening, someone washing a teacup, folding a shawl, closing a book. But most are dark now, their curtains drawn, the homes inside already easing into rest. Alier crosses the square slowly, his steps matching the rhythm of the night. The fountain in the center gurgles softly, its stone basin worn smooth from generations of hands and time. A lantern hangs above it on a thin wire stretched between two lampposts. It's one of the oldest in the village tarnished brass, a glass pane long since replaced with a patch of frosted sea glass. Alier lights it gently, as though waking an old friend from a deep nap. Then he sits for a moment on the edge of the fountain. Not because he is tired, though perhaps he is, but because the moment asks for stillness. The village seems to sigh with him. A breeze stirs the ivy on the wall of the tailor's shop, and somewhere in the distance, an owl calls once and then falls silent again. The lanterns are glowing now all across Starfall, each one a tiny ember holding the night in its soft hands. They line the lanes and pathways, cast gentle halos on porch steps and window frames. They do not flicker like fire nor hum like bulbs. They simply shine steadily, kindly, without asking anything in return. The night deepens, and Elier makes his way past the chapel, where a bell once rang for weddings and spring festivals, but now simply rests in its tower like a sleeping guardian. The stone steps up to the chapel are worn smooth in the middle, where years of footsteps have passed in careful, measured rhythm. At the top of the steps, beneath the narrow overhang of the arched wooden door, hangs a lantern made from an old oil can, its edges darkened from the warmth of 1,000 past flames. He lights it quietly, and the glow spreads out over the carved stone, catching on the etchings worn into the wall's names and dates from long ago. Moments someone once thought should be remembered forever. Some have faded, but the light traces them all the same, as though the lantern sees what the eyes no longer can. Elier pauses beside a stone bench nestled beneath a large plum tree in the chapel garden. This is a place few visit at night, but the tree blooms even out of season, and the lantern that hangs from one of its branches always glows a little warmer than the others. He lights it gently, and for a moment, the scent of blossoms swells in the air, a soft sweetness like memory itself. He rests his hand against the bark of the tree before moving on, continuing down the winding path toward the northern edge of Starfall. There, the homes are smaller and spaced farther apart. The cobblestones give way to grassy lanes, and lanterns are fewer, scattered along wooden fence posts or tucked into the arms of trees that lean toward the road like they re-listening. Elier's path takes him past the potter's cottage, where unfinished vases line the windowsill and clay dust still swirls in the moonlight. A lantern here is shaped like a little house, its panes of glass etched with tiny windows and doors. When Elier lights it, the inside glows like a hearth, and you almost expect to see a miniature figure step into view behind the glass and wave. Not far from there, a narrow bridge stretches across the creek, its wooden boards creaking softly under Elier's boots. A single lantern swings from a beam at its center, casting light over the water below, where lily pads drift and frogs sometimes sing. Tonight, the lantern's glow reflects on the surface like a coin tossed into a wishing pool. The water shivers as a breeze passes through the trees, and Elier stands still, watching the reflection flicker like a memory half remembered. Just beyond the bridge is the oldest part of the village. The homes here are nestled into the hill itself, with roofs that disappear beneath moss, and windows that peek out from ivy like eyes behind leafy curtains. This is where the elders live, those whose hands have planted more than they've harvested, whose eyes carry the weight of many seasons. The lanterns here are different. Some are carved from hollowed gourds, others made from melted glass or hammered copper. Each one is unique, handmade long ago by the very people who now sleep behind the quiet doors and shuttered windows. Elier lights them slowly, one after the other, pausing between each to listen to the silence, which is never really silent in Starfall. It is filled with things you can only hear when the world is truly quiet. The whisper of leaves brushing one another, the far-off call of an owl, the delicate creak of branches settling into stillness. There is a small path that curls behind the last cottage and leads up the side of the hill, where a garden used to grow. No one tends it anymore, but the earth still remembers. Wild herbs and sleepy daisies bloom in bunches, and tucked among them are 4 tiny lanterns, low to the ground, shaped like mushrooms. Elier kneels to light each one. The light they give off is faint, barely more than a glow, but together they form a ring of warmth in the soil, like an old story tucked between pages. From this height, Elier can see nearly all of Starfall. The village is bathed in gentle amber now, each path and rooftop kissed with the glow of the lanterns he's lit. They pulse gently, not like flames, but like breathing. Inhale, exhale. Glow, rest. It's as though the village itself is alive and the lanterns are its heartbeat. But Elier's journey isn't over. He descends the hill by a path hidden between 2 leaning birch trees. It curls down toward the meadow, where the grass grows tall and sighs in the wind. A few scattered lanterns line the path here, each one carefully placed beside a rock or tied to a wooden stake. These lanterns are simpler, some just glass jars wrapped in twine. They were placed long ago by hands that no longer walk this way, but Elier lights them all the same. Their light joins the chorus of the night, quiet and kind. At the far end of the meadow stands an old windmill, its sails unmoving, the wooden frame leaning slightly with age. No one uses it anymore, but it's never been taken down. Starfall doesn't remove what's simply grown quiet. The windmill has a lantern tucked just beneath the ledge of the upper beam, and Elier climbs the narrow steps carefully to reach it. When he opens the jar, the light inside spirals upward like a ribbon, twirling into the lantern and glowing a deep, steady gold. He remains up there for a moment, letting the view wrap around him. The lanterns below shimmer like stars scattered across the land. Above, the real stars begin to crowd the sky, pressing gently through the veil of night. Elier descends slowly and continues on. Past the edge of the meadow lies the woods, deep, ancient, and tangled. Few go there after dark, but Elier does. There's a trail, overgrown and narrow, that winds between trunks so thick 2 people couldn't wrap their arms around one. The trees here are old enough to remember things the rest of the world has forgotten. They creak softly in the breeze, and the ground beneath them smells of damp earth and fallen leaves. Even here, lanterns appear, hung low from branches, set into notches carved into bark, or resting inside the hollow of tree stumps. These lights are more secretive. Their glow is filtered through leaves, scattered like light through water. Elier moves quietly through the forest, not out of fear, but out of respect. The woods are not unfriendly, only private. They have their own stories, their own lanterns to protect. There's one lantern in particular, that hangs from the branch of an ash tree so tall it disappears into the darkness above. It's unlike the other's glass blown into the shape of a raindrop with swirls of blue and silver within. Elier lights it last of all the forest lanterns. The light it gives off is soft but deep, as if it doesn't just light the woods, but remembers them. He places his hand gently on the tree's bark, and then continues along the trail, which curves back toward the village. The path takes him along the edge of the northern ridge, where the land slopes sharply downward into shadow. There are no lanterns here, not until he reaches the hill. This hill stands apart from the rest, not because it's taller, but because it feels held, protected, quiet in a different way. At the top of this hill stands a single post, old but strong, and from it hangs a lantern. Elier climbs the hill slowly, not because it's steep, but because this is where his walk always ends, and endings, even gentle ones, deserve reverence. He stands before the lantern. It's clean, perfectly maintained, its frame of dark brass polished and free of rust. The glass panes are clear, yet the lantern remains unlit. He never lights this one. He never has. He sets his staff down, unshoulders his satchel, and stands quietly beside it. Some believe this lantern is for someone who hasn't yet arrived. Others say it's meant for a moment that hasn't yet come. Some say it's a promise, a waiting, a light meant to be lit not by Elier, but by someone who will know when it's time. He doesn't stay long, only long enough to look, to listen, to breathe. Then he turns and walks down the hill. As he returns to the village, the lanterns stretch out before him like a trail of fireflies, lighting the way home. Each flame he lit tonight will burn gently until morning. They will keep watch while the people of Starfall sleep, while their dreams unfurl like ribbon through the still air. And when dawn touches the rooftops, the lanterns will fade, not all at once, but little by little, like the stars above. The village, too, will sleep, and the night will carry what it holds, stories, hopes, memories, into the quiet places of the heart, where they will rest until needed again. And Elier, he will wait until tomorrow night. When the bell tolls once, and the first lantern beneath the willow waits for its light. The days in Starfall were never in a hurry, and the nights even less so. As one night passed and the morning slowly arrived, the village didn't spring to life. It unfurled, a pot set on to boil. A chair creaked as someone eased into it by the window. The first sound of sweeping as someone gently brushed petals or dust from their stoop. No alarms, no traffic, no crowds. Just a quiet bloom of daylight stretching across roofs and fields, warming the lanterns until their glow disappeared like dreams upon waking. Elier, as always, was nowhere to be seen during the day. He was a man of twilight. He walked when others settled, and when the sun ruled the sky, he seemed to belong elsewhere, as if the daylight had nothing left to ask of him. But Starfall, in its calm silence, remembered him. Children sometimes played a game where they would try to follow the faint scent left behind on the lantern keeper, ash path, a mix of old wood, river stone, and something like dried thyme or starlight. They would leap between the pools of golden dust that sometimes lingered around the lantern posts in the morning, laughing and whispering their guesses about where he went during the day. Some believed he lived beneath the village, where there were winding tunnels and quiet chambers filled with unlit lanterns and forgotten stories. Others were sure he lived high up in the cliffs where the clouds dipped low enough to kiss the rocks, and the air always tasted of rain. A few whispered that he didn't live anywhere at all, that he was only awake when the world slept, a spirit of quiet woven into the bones of Starfall itself. The truth, no one knew, and no one needed to. In a village like Starfall, stories mattered more than explanations, and the story of Elier, the lantern keeper, was one held dear. On the next night, just as dusk began its slow descent over the valley and the bell in the square gave its single patient chime, Elier returned. No one saw where from. He was simply there at the bend of the path beneath the willow tree, standing with his coat brushed clean and his satchel full of soft, bottled light. And so began another evening. The first lantern flickered awake with its deep blue glow, and Elier moved on just as he had the night before. But on this night, something small was different. A breeze had shifted. The air was a little cooler. A sense of change, not unwelcome but noticeable, seemed to curl gently through the streets. Elier noticed. He always noticed. Past the bakery and its shuttered windows, he paused longer than usual. The lantern by the gate had a new ribbon tied to its handle, a thin strip of fabric with stars printed along the edge. He examined it with a soft smile and lit the lantern as though it had earned something new, a gentle praise, a silent recognition. On nights like this, the stories inside the lantern seemed louder, not in sound, but in presence. Each glow held something close to the surface, like bubbles beneath a still lake, ready to rise. Elier moved toward the north path, where the homes leaned closer together and the ground sloped gently upward. He reached the lantern, shaped like a bell, its frame cast from melted horseshoes long ago by the village blacksmith. When he lit it, the light that bloomed inside pulsed faintly, like the rhythm of breath. This lantern had always been linked to something tender. Long ago, it had been hung in memory of a young woman who used to sing at the edge of the square. Her voice had woven through the evening air like thread through a loom, soft and slow. She had once said that each person had a night song, something only the stars could hear. When she passed, this lantern was made in her honor, and every time it's lit, villagers swear they feel a thread of song brushing their thoughts just beneath hearing. Elier rested a hand on the post just for a moment, then turned toward the old stone steps that led to the library garden. This garden was unlike the others. It didn't bloom in neat rows or organized beds. It was a riot of green and color, vines climbing over benches, dandelions tucked between paving stones, sunflowers bending over wooden fences like sentries bowing low. No one kept it neat, and no one needed to. The garden had been planted by the children of the village over generations, each one choosing a seed or sprout to tuck into the earth, and in the heart of the garden stood the reading tree, wide and low, with branches perfect for leaning against. This tree had heard 1,000 whispered stories and 1,000 more wishes. Nestled in its highest fork was a tiny lantern, shaped like an open book. It wasn't always visible. The leaves often hid it. But when Elier lifted his staff, the light found it easily. It bloomed with a soft golden glow that filtered through the green, leaves like a memory warming its way back into someone's heart. Further along the path beyond the weaver's house, Elier came to a row of 3 lanterns that always made him pause. The first was shaped like a clock, though it had no hands. Its glass panes were frosted with age, and the chain from which it hung was woven with strands of old thread red, blue, silver gray. This lantern belonged to no one in particular, or perhaps to everyone. It was called the Lantern of Waiting. People came here when they were unsure, when they stood between things before a journey, after a loss, during long nights when answers felt far away. It did not offer solutions, only light. And sometimes that was enough. The second lantern was simply round, with green-tinted glass and a copper base. It sat on a stone ledge near the corner of the lane and was always surrounded by small, flat pebbles. Children left them there, painted or carved with initials, tiny symbols, or just fingerprints. This lantern was called the Keeper of Firsts. It remembered beginnings, the first word, the first step, the first goodbye. When lit, its glow was playful, almost curious, like a spark just learning what fire is. The third lantern was tall and narrow, set atop a post that had twisted slightly over time. It was made of dark glass that shimmered with purple and indigo when the light hit it just right. This one was called the Dream Holder. It was lit only once each night, and only by Elier. People came to it quietly during the day, one at a time, and placed a hand on the post while they thought of a dream, not a wish or a goal, but something deeper, something secret. And at night, when Elier poured light into the lantern, it shimmered in layers, sometimes clear, sometimes clouded, sometimes scattered like constellations. No one knew how it worked, but everyone who left their dream there felt something shift within them, like a knot gently untangling, like a breath taken more fully than before. Elier lit the 3 lanterns slowly. The air around them seemed to hold still, and for a moment, the stars above flickered a little brighter, as if leaning closer. He continued on, past the fields and the edge of the village. The world opened wider. Hills rolled into one another like the backs of sleeping animals, and the path narrowed to a ribbon through the tall grass. Here, the lanterns were farther apart. Some stood alone in the dark, their posts weathered, their chains gently swaying in the breeze. These were the memory lanterns. They were placed not near homes or gardens, but along the outer paths, beside stones, beneath trees, near streams that have long since changed course. Each one held a piece of something too delicate to keep indoors. An old letter, a forgotten melody, a name spoken once in kindness and never again. Elier lit them all, one by one. With the same quiet reverence he gave the first lantern under the willow. He did not rush. The night, after all, was not in a hurry. And then, as always, he climbed the final hill. The unlit lantern waited, still as ever, hanging from its old post, its glass clear, its frame strong. It had never once been lit, and yet it never seemed lonely. It simply waited. Allier stood beside it. The wind moved softly around them, rustling the grass, carrying the scent of lavender and thyme. The stars above blinked gently. The lantern beside him remained dark, and yet, as always, it felt full, as though its light already existed, just not in a way that eyes could see. He placed his satchel down, leaned his staff against the post, and stood in the silence. He stood, not thinking, not remembering, not planning. Just standing, as though listening to something too quiet for ears. And then he turned and walked back toward the village. And below him, Starfall glowed, each lantern alive, each one a tiny promise kept. The village was at rest, and soon he would be too. By the time Allier reached the village again, the glow from the lanterns had deepened into something richer, no longer just a soft light to guide the way, but a quiet presence, a comfort. Each pool of light along the paths and under the eaves of homes felt like an exhale, like the village itself was breathing calmly in its sleep. He moved slowly through the lower lanes, passing shutters that had been drawn shut for hours now. From within, the faint rise and fall of breath, the stillness of resting hands, and the settled hush of blankets pulled up to chins spoke of peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that simply is. The cats were curled beneath garden benches and windowsills. The dogs had long since circled and found their favorite spots. The birds that had once lined the rooftops were tucked into nests, heads nestled beneath wings. Even the frogs along the stream had stilled, letting the night speak its gentler language. Allier paused by the fountain, still bubbling, its water catching the light from the hanging lantern in small, glittering bursts. He sat again at its edge, just as he always did. But tonight he stayed a little longer. His satchel rested beside him, half empty now. The jars inside still glowed faintly, a soft promise for tomorrow. He watched the ripples move outward from the center of the fountain, ever outward, never back. The village had not changed, not truly. But something in the way the night wrapped around it tonight felt different. A little closer, a little more still. Like the story it was telling was reaching its final page for the evening. A small stone sat at the edge of the fountain, flat and painted with the shape of a lantern in gold. He hadn't noticed it before. Perhaps a child had left it that morning. He picked it up, turned it over, and found 3 words written in careful, uneven script. For the light. He smiled. Not a wide smile, but one that folded softly at the corners of his eyes. A smile full of memory and something older than memory. He placed the stone in the satchel alongside the jars and rose once more. As he walked through the last of the village paths, he passed the schoolhouse. Its little bell tower, silent now, leaned slightly with age. A lantern hung there too wan that had been lit for years by the headmistress before Allier arrived. When she passed, the lantern had gone unlit for a while, until one evening it quietly flickered to life again. No one had touched it. No one had opened a jar or struck a match. It simply remembered. Elliot never touched that lantern. He walked by it each night, let its glow brush his shoulder, and continued on. There were places like that throughout the village, lanterns that needed no help. Lanterns that lit not because of Elliot's hand, but because of presence, memory, love left behind in just the right way. One such place was the orchard. Old trees, bent low with age, stretched their limbs across a field that once teemed with hands reaching into branches and baskets spilling with apples. Now, only a few fruit clung to the highest limbs, and the earth beneath was soft with moss and fallen leaves. No one picked her anymore, but still the lanterns burned. Not many, just 3. One at the far end hung from a crooked branch that arched like a question mark. Another beside the stone bench where old lovers once met to sit and peel apples slowly, quietly. And the third, tucked between the roots of the oldest tree, nestled like a secret. Elliot walked among them, the light brushing his coat, catching in the folds of the patches. He didn't light them. He didn't need to. These lanterns had learned the rhythm of the orchard. They woke with the dusk. They rested at dawn. He touched each one lightly with his fingertips as he passed. And then he turned, following a path most had forgotten. It led down a slope behind the orchard, through tall grasses that swayed in slow waves, and came to a small, sunken clearing. Here stood a cottage. It was not large, not grand, not even terribly neat. Vines clung to its walls. A chair sat by the door, its legs a bit uneven. The windows were dusty, but the curtains within were clean. The garden had long since gone wild, and the fence was more idea than structure. But the cottage stood, quiet, steady, waiting. There were no lanterns hanging on the posts, but 3 sat on the windowsills, glass jars, old and mismatched. One had a crack, one was cloudy. The third still bore the remains of a faded sticker with the outline of a flower. Elliot opened his satchel and withdrew 3 jars. He poured a little light into each lantern, watching as they flickered awake. Soft, steady, simple. He did not enter the cottage. He only stood for a while in front of it, his eyes taking in the garden, the door, the stone steps that were beginning to crumble at the edges. Then, slowly, he turned and made his way back up the hill. It was not his home. Not anymore. Perhaps it never had been. But it was a part of him, just like the lanterns, just like the village, just like the stories tucked inside every glow. Back through the orchard, past the schoolhouse and the square, Elliot made his final turn, one last lantern to see, the one that was never lit. He climbed the hill once more. The grass parted around his steps, and the night air cooled with the rising land. At the top, the unlit lantern swayed gently on its post. The stars above were bright now, countless, steady, the kind of stars that make you feel both very small and very held. Elliot stood before the lantern, and this time he did not simply pause. He reached into his satchel and drew out one final jar. He held it in both hands. Inside, the light was different. It did not pulse or flicker. It shimmered like mist and memory, like reflection and silence. Not bright, not dim, just infinite. He looked at the lantern. He looked at the jar, and then very gently he opened the lid. He did not pour the light into the lantern. He simply held it open, standing beneath the stars, and let the night do the rest. Slowly the light rose. It lifted from the jar like breath, like fog, like a dream released from sleep. It swirled once around Ellier's hands, then around the lantern. It passed through the glass, around the frame, above the post. It did not settle. It hovered. And then, as gently as it had come, it faded. The lantern remained unlit, but the night itself glowed. For a long while, Elliot stood there. Then he closed the jar, placed it back in his satchel, picked up his staff, and turned once more toward the village. And below him, Starfall rested, every lantern glowing, every story held, every heart quiet, every breath calm. The kind of night that carries you without asking where you've been, that holds you without needing to speak, that whispers to your dreaming self, "You're home. You are safe. You are light." Ellier's footsteps faded down the hill, blending with the hush of wind and stars and the slow drift of night. And somewhere behind him, in a cottage covered in vines, a single curtain stirred, and the faintest sound of someone humming could be heard, if only in the deepest part of sleep. So rest now. The lanterns are lit. The village is at peace. The night is long and gentle. And the story will wait for you again tomorrow.